Welcome to another deep dive. We're using this time to get up to speed on what's happening around the world. And to do that, we're turning to the latest issue of The Economist magazine.
Ah, always a good read.
Always, yeah. Buckle up because we've got a lot to cover. We're talking political intrigue, economic head scratchers. We've even got a coup attempt and a record-breaking football streak on the docket.
Sounds like the world is keeping us on our toes.
Absolutely. To help us sort through it all, we've got our expert here who can help us connect the dots, make sense of this complex world we're living in.
Well, if The Economist is anything to go by, it seems like the world is, I don't know, maybe teetering on the edge of something.
Yeah, there's definitely this feeling of unrest, kind of like a low hum in the background of every story, like
Yeah.
a constant anxiety. What would you say are some of the key factors fueling this?
Well, one thing that jumps out is the fragility of political systems.
Hmm.
Look at Europe, for instance.
Yeah.
You've got this wave of political fragmentation sweeping across the continent.
We're seeing those weak coalition governments.
Exactly. Or even minority governments really struggling to hold on to power.
I see. And what does that mean, practically speaking? What's the impact of these shaky governments?
Well, it can be pretty significant,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to tackling those big, major issues. The magazine highlights how these governments are having a real tough time with defense spending.
Yeah, trying to increase it.
Right. Bolster their defenses
Yeah.
makes sense in a world that feels more and more unpredictable every day. But then there's reality, right? Tight budgets, competing priorities.
So we're talking about a Europe that's vulnerable both politically and militarily.
That's the concern, yeah. And it's amplified, by the potential return of Donald Trump to the White House.
Oh, right.
His past stance on trade, on NATO, the war in Ukraine, it's got a lot of people in Europe feeling on edge.
It's like the world is holding its breath, waiting to see what a second Trump presidency would mean for the global order.
Yeah, the uncertainty is palpable. And it's not just Europe either. You see it in the Middle East. That truce in Lebanon after the conflict with Hezbollah, it feels incredibly delicate.
And then, you've got this attempted coup in South Korea. That feels like a real wild card.
Yeah, no kidding.
What are the implications there, not just for South Korea, but for the region as a whole?
It raises some big questions, right? About the stability of democracy in South Korea. Given its importance in the region, it's significant. And then you have to consider what it means for the country's foreign policy, the relationship with the U.S., their approach to North Korea, a lot to unpack.
A lot of political plates spinning in the air right now. But it's not just political instability feeding this global anxiety, is it? The economic picture is pretty shaky, too.
No, you're absolutely right. The magazine highlights several economic narratives. Take government spending in Europe, for example. It's soaring,
Oh, yeah. I read about that.
leading to some serious concerns about debt levels and whether we're headed for another Eurozone crisis.
So are we talking about a sequel to the Eurozone crisis? Or are there some key differences this time around?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There are some similarities for sure. Rising debt, concerns about stability, a sense that maybe some governments are living beyond their means. But the context is different. Interest rates are much lower now than they were back then. And the European Central Bank, they've learned some lessons from the previous crisis. They're likely to be more proactive this time.
Okay, so a mixed bag then. Some reason for concern, but also maybe some safeguards in place. But what about those U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports? That seems like a big wild card in the economic equation.
It is, and the magazine digs into how Chinese businesses are trying to mitigate the potential damage. They're looking at new markets, diversifying their supply chains, even setting up manufacturing in other countries.
So like an economic chess match then. Each side trying to anticipate the other's next move.
Exactly. And then, amidst all this global economic maneuvering, you've got these interesting developments within specific countries. The push for electric cars in Britain, for instance,
Yeah, I read about that.
creating both opportunities and challenges. On one hand, driving innovation, investment in new tech. On the other hand, it's really exposing the limits of the existing infrastructure.
Like the lack of charging stations?
Yeah, particularly the charging network. Not quite there yet.
2 steps forward, 1 step back.
In some ways, yeah. And then there's this trend. It's kind of surprising that the magazine highlights this surge in gambling globally.
Oh, yeah, I was
Yeah.
curious about that. Especially online sports betting.
Right. That seems to be a big part of it.
What's driving that? Are people just looking for a quick buck, or is there something more to it?
Well, the magazine suggests a possible link between this rise in gambling and the economic anxieties we've been talking about.
Oh, interesting.
almost like people are seeking a way to escape the uncertainty of their financial realities, looking for a quick fix, a chance to beat the odds.
It's fascinating how something as individual as gambling could be tied to these larger economic forces, but it also raises some ethical questions, doesn't it?
Definitely. Especially for governments.
Hmm.
They're benefiting from this, right? The increased tax revenue from all this gambling. It makes you think about the role of the state
Right, regulating and profiting from an activity that can be pretty addictive.
and potentially harmful for sure.
A complex issue with both economic and ethical dimensions. But, amidst all these global trends and anxieties, the magazine doesn't lose sight of the human stories that are unfolding.
Not at all.
They're often a really poignant counterpoint to these abstract discussions of economic indicators and political maneuvering.
Right, they ground us.
For instance, you have the story of Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, murdered in what seems like a targeted attack.
Wow.
It's a chilling reminder that even in positions of power and privilege, no one is immune to the violence and instability swirling around us.
That's a sobering thought.
And then there's the plight of veterans in the U.S. facing these huge obstacles trying to access healthcare and disability benefits.
I read about that, yeah.
Even in developed nations, it seems like the systems designed to support those who serve their country can fall short. And then there's the story of this mother in Colombia desperately searching for her kidnapped son.
Oh, right. I remember that.
This is all happening amidst the country's ongoing peace negotiations. It's such a tragic illustration of the human cost of conflict, even when peace is supposedly on the horizon.
It really drives home the point that behind every statistic, every headline, there are real people whose lives are being deeply affected by these global events.
It's easy to get lost in the abstractions.
Absolutely.
But these human stories serve as this powerful reminder that we're not just talking about numbers and trends, we're talking about people's lives, their hopes, their fears, their struggles.
Right. The human element. It's essential.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in all the negative stuff, especially when the world feels so, turbulent. But the magazine does offer some glimmers of hope.
Oh, good. I was hoping you'd say that. What are some of those bright spots?
Well, for one, the successful restoration of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris.
Oh, yeah.
It's a powerful symbol, don't you think?
Yeah.
Resilience, cultural heritage, testament to human ingenuity, the enduring power of art and architecture.
Absolutely. Seeing it rise from the ashes like that, after that devastating fire, was really inspiring. A reminder that even after great loss, we can rebuild, restore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of rebuilding, the magazine highlights the success of Brazilian football clubs
Oh.
in international competitions. They've been on this, unprecedented winning streak.
Mm.
And The Economist attributes this in part to some innovative financial models they've adopted.
Yeah, they talked about the rise of football PLCs in Brazil. Can you explain what that means? I have to admit, I was a little lost on that one.
Sure. It basically means that some of these clubs have become like publicly traded companies.
Okay.
They're selling shares to investors, which gives them a huge injection of capital.
Okay.
Allows them to invest in better players, facilities, training programs, all that.
So it's a way of leveraging the passion for football into a financial engine for the clubs themselves. Clever. But even more mind-blowing was that article on asteroid mining. It's like science fiction becoming reality.
It's definitely ambitious. It's still early days, of course.
Sure.
But the potential is enormous. I mean, imagine extracting valuable resources from asteroids. It could revolutionize space exploration, the global economy, who knows?
The possibilities are pretty mind-boggling. Building space stations, launching deep space missions, all using materials sourced directly from asteroids. It's almost too futuristic to grasp.
It stretches the boundaries of our imagination, that's for sure.
Hmm.
But it speaks to human ingenuity,
Mm-hmm.
our drive to push the limits of what's possible. But, speaking of pushing limits, The Economist's report on public services in Britain paints a rather sobering picture.
Yeah, it does.
It seems like, even in developed nations, ensuring the effective delivery of essential services, it's a constant struggle.
It is.
The article highlights the ongoing problems with Britain's National Health Service, the challenges facing the education system, even issues with the justice system. A lack of reliable data is making it hard to address backlogs and inefficiencies.
It's almost as if the British government is flying blind in some key areas, relying on outdated systems, incomplete information.
Yeah, I got that sense too. And it's not just a British problem. The magazine also touches on the challenges facing America's Food and Drug Administration, specifically their oversight of food additives.
That's right. I remember that article. They were raising concerns about the self-regulation system for these additives, pointing out that the FDA often lacks the information to really assess their safety.
Right.
Makes you wonder how many potentially harmful substances are slipping through the cracks.
It's a valid concern. Highlights how crucial those government agencies are in safeguarding public health. But when they're understaffed, underfunded, or just plain overwhelmed, the consequences can be pretty far-reaching.
Speaking of consequences, I thought The Economist's analysis of Donald Trump's relationship with the media and his use of the term deep state was insightful.
Yeah, that was a good one.
It delves into this historical tension between American presidents and the FBI, the importance of both national security and democratic accountability. It's like a tightrope walk, trying to balance those two.
It is, and it's a dynamic that's played out over and over in American history. But with Trump back in the White House, this tension is likely to, well, escalate. His tendency to see any criticism as part of some grand conspiracy against him, it's concerning.
Right.
And his appointment of Kash Patel, a staunch loyalist with a history of, pushing unfounded claims, to head the FBI raises questions about the future of the agency's independence.
It's like he's setting the stage for a showdown between his administration and the institutions designed to check his power, provide those balances. Could be a recipe for a constitutional crisis, don't you think?
It certainly has the potential. The implications for American democracy are huge. If those institutions, the ones that are supposed to uphold the rule of law, hold those in power accountable, if they're undermined, the whole system is weakened. It's a sobering thought, given everything else going on in the world. But, amidst all this talk of political unrest, struggling public services, potential power struggles, we can't forget those stories of individual resilience and compassion that the magazine highlights.
I agree, those stories are important.
They're like a vital counterpoint to all the doom and gloom.
Right. Like, for instance, the story about the Doctors Without Borders surgeon working in Yemen,
Oh, yeah.
trying to bring some semblance of order to the chaos of that conflict zone. What a testament to individual commitment in the face of overwhelming adversity.
It's really inspiring, isn't it? Putting themselves in danger like that to help others.
And I thought it was great how the surgeon was focusing on training and mentoring local staff,
Yeah, that's key.
empowering communities to care for themselves, even in the toughest circumstances.
It's about creating that ripple effect of positive change, even in the middle of chaos. And speaking of ripples, The Economist's report on the impact of social media on food culture was fascinating. Who knew a simple online cooking video could cause a run on feta cheese in Iceland?
It's pretty amazing, isn't it? The power of the internet to connect people across borders and cultures and then to influence behavior in these unexpected ways. It's like a global food chain reaction triggered by a viral video.
Yeah, it's remarkable. But of course, social media doesn't always have positive impacts. The magazine also touches on that debate in Australia about banning social media for kids under 16.
Right.
It's a tough issue, no easy answers.
Yep.
But it does highlight the real concerns about the potential negative effects of social media on young people.
Especially with how much time they're spending online these days. Makes you think about screen time, the content they're consuming, the impact on their mental health, their social development, their well-being in general.
It's a challenge, that's for sure. Parents, educators, policymakers, they're all wrestling with it all over the world. How do we harness the benefits of this technology while also mitigating the risks? It's a tough balancing act.
Speaking of balancing acts, the magazine also gets into the challenges facing Europe when it comes to dealing with, potentially, a second Trump presidency.
Yeah.
They seem to be walking this tightrope, trying to maintain that strong transatlantic relationship, but also stand up for their own interests.
It's like trying to please two masters at the same time.
Exactly. And the stakes are even higher with the potential for disagreements on things like trade, defense spending, the war in Ukraine.
For sure. And The Economist suggests that Italy might become like a swing vote within the EU, aligning with Trump's agenda if it's good for their economy. But they also point out that Italy has a lot to lose by fighting with Brussels, especially with their reliance on EU funds. So it's a delicate dance of allegiances and priorities. But it's not just about international diplomacy, is it? The magazine also highlights some fascinating leadership dynamics happening within countries, like that story about Bushra Khan, the wife of former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan, stepping into the political spotlight.
Right.
Her entry into politics has really shaken things up in Pakistan, especially within her husband's party. Some aren't too happy about the idea of a political dynasty.
It's like she's challenging the status quo, causing friction, but she's not backing down.
Not at all. And her actions have provoked a strong response from the current Pakistani government. They're using her involvement as an excuse to crack down on protests, increase censorship online.
Wow.
It's like they're afraid of her influence, her ability to rally support, challenge their authority.
It's a reminder that even in those really patriarchal societies, women can be powerful agents of change.
Absolutely. And it's not just in politics. The magazine highlights the success of that Chinese film, Her Story.
Oh, I saw that.
It
Yeah.
challenges traditional gender roles, and it's resonating with audiences across China.
Yeah, it's a great example of how art can reflect and shape societal attitudes.
Right. The film's success suggests that people are hungry for stories that offer more nuanced portrayals of women's experiences.
For sure. It's a sign of progress. Maybe a glimmer of hope that things are moving in the right direction, even if it's slow and, sometimes a bit bumpy. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from political dramas and economic uncertainty to stories of human resilience and social change. It's clear the world is constantly changing, throwing new challenges and opportunities our way.
Yeah, it's always in flux. And one of the things that I think this issue of The Economist really gets at is this idea of perception versus reality.
Oh, interesting.
How much of what we see and hear is actually accurate, and how much is shaped by our biases, our preconceived notions, the constant stream of information that bombards us every day.
That's a really good point. I remember that article about the blind state of Britain. They argued that despite all the data we have access to, we're actually becoming less informed about some pretty key issues.
Right, things like immigration, crime, even the number of people who are employed.
Exactly. Like we're drowning in data, but starving for real insight.
Yeah, and they suggested that this reliance on, flawed or incomplete data can lead to distorted narratives, misguided policy decisions. We make assumptions based on what we think we know, but often that knowledge is based on incomplete or even inaccurate information.
And it's not just about data, is it? It's about our own biases, our preconceived notions. We gravitate towards information that confirms what we already believe, even if it's not really supported by evidence. It's like we're all living in our own little echo chambers.
Yeah, reinforcing our own biases, making it harder to really talk to people who hold different views. That's a real challenge these days. We're bombarded with information from every direction. It's tough to separate truth from fiction. It's like navigating a minefield of misinformation.
So how do we do that? How do we navigate that minefield? How do we become more discerning consumers of information, more aware of our own biases, more willing to engage with those perspectives that challenge our own? It's a pretty daunting task.
It's not easy, that's for sure. It takes effort, attention, and you have to be willing to step outside your comfort zone. But it's crucial if we want to understand the world around us, contribute to meaningful solutions. We have to be willing to question our assumptions, look for different perspectives, have respectful dialogue with those who think differently.
So it's about being open to the possibility that we might be wrong, that our view is limited, that there's always more to learn.
Exactly. It's about embracing intellectual humility,
Right.
recognizing that none of us have all the answers. But it's also about recognizing that amidst all the complexity and uncertainty, there's still room for joy, for creativity, for connection, for the simple pleasures in life.
Yeah.
Finding that balance between staying informed about the world's challenges and nurturing our own well-being, finding moments of peace and joy.
That's a good point. And this issue of The Economist, while it tackles some pretty heavy subjects, it also offers some moments of levity and escape, like that piece on the popularity of online cooking videos. Who knew that watching someone make a giant chocolate bar from scratch could be so captivating to millions of people?
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's a reminder that even in a world full of uncertainty and complexity, there's still room for joy, for creativity, for the simple pleasures of food and entertainment. Finding those moments that bring us together, that make us smile, that remind us of the beauty and wonder that still exists.
Well said. And speaking of entertainment, The Economist had a review of that new papal thriller, Conclave.
Oh,
It's a locked-room mystery set in the Vatican, a group of cardinals trying to elect a new pope. Sounds like a fascinating mix of political intrigue, religious symbolism, and just good old-fashioned suspense.
a whodunit with a theological twist. I'll have to check that out.
I think you'd enjoy it.
So we've talked about the dark side of information overload, the importance of being media savvy, the need for a little fun and escape, and the power of the human spirit to find hope and connection, even in the face of difficult times.
It's all part of the human experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
We need to stay informed, but we also need to find those moments of joy and connection. It's about finding that balance, that equilibrium that allows us to navigate all the complexity without being overwhelmed. without losing sight of what truly matters.
Absolutely. And sometimes those moments of connection, of inspiration, they come from the most unexpected places, like that story about John Kinsel,
Oh, yeah.
one of the last surviving Navajo code talkers from World War II.
Oh, remarkable man. His contribution to the Allied victory was crucial.
Absolutely. It's a real testament to the bravery, the ingenuity, the resilience of the Navajo people. I was so fascinated by his description of how they developed the code.
I know, it's incredible.
This blend of military strategy and cultural metaphor, drawing on their deep connection to the land, their unique language traditions.
It shows that diversity is a strength, and that cultural knowledge can be incredibly powerful.
It's a story of personal triumph, too. Despite everything he went through during the war, John Kinsel came home and built a life, finding comfort in his Navajo heritage, pride in serving his country.
It's a reminder that even amidst the horrors of war, there can be stories of resilience, of hope, of the strength of the human spirit. And it's a reminder that even the most extraordinary individuals are, at their core, just ordinary people, facing the same challenges and joys as all of us.
Those are the stories we need to remember. They give us context, perspective, a sense of connection to this larger human story. We're all part of something bigger than ourselves, something that goes beyond borders, cultures, even time itself.
I agree. And speaking of connections that transcend borders, The Economist also explores the impact of Chinese investments on emerging markets. Even with China's economic slowdown, their lending activities are having a big impact on borrowing costs for developing nations.
Yeah, they were saying that bond markets see those Chinese loans as riskier than loans from other places, maybe because of the lack of transparency or the perception that there are political motivations behind those investments.
Right.
It does make you worry about whether those loans are sustainable and if they might lead to economic instability down the line.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that the global financial system is interconnected. What happens in one place affects people and economies thousands of miles away.
Exactly. And it underscores how important responsible lending practices are, how crucial transparency is in international finance. If we want a more stable and equitable global economy, we have to ensure lending practices are fair, sustainable, and beneficial for everyone involved.
Absolutely. It's about thinking long-term, focusing on stability and shared prosperity. So we've covered a lot today. The blind state, information overload, media literacy, the importance of joy and connection. We've explored a whole range of topics.
They have.
And I think we've seen how those themes are all connected. They weave together to create the tapestry of the human experience. It's complex, often contradictory, but it's ultimately a story of resilience, of creativity, of our capacity for hope and connection.
It's a story that's still being written, too. It's a work in progress, and it needs us all to stay informed, engaged, and willing to challenge the way things are. We all have a role to play in shaping the future, no matter how small our actions might seem.
That's right. And it's about embracing the unknown, the uncertainty that lies ahead. We can't predict the future, but we can approach it with curiosity, with courage, and with a commitment to building a world that's more just, more equitable, more sustainable for everyone.
Well said. And sometimes those moments of connection, those moments of inspiration, they come from the most unexpected places. Like, for instance, the story of the botanists in Leningrad.
During World War II,
Yeah.
I was amazed by their dedication, protecting that vital seed bank throughout the siege.
Risking their lives to preserve those seeds in the midst of unimaginable hardship. It's a powerful testament to the human spirit, isn't it?
It really is. The lengths we'll go to protect what we value, even when faced with incredible adversity.
And it speaks to the importance of foresight, too, thinking about the future, even in the darkest of times.
Absolutely. They understood that even in the midst of war, even when survival was uncertain, preserving those seeds represented hope, the hope for a future where life could flourish again. And it's a reminder that even small acts of courage and perseverance can have a profound impact on the world.
So, to our listeners, if you've been inspired by what you've heard today, I encourage you to check out The Economist. Delve into those stories that spark your interest and continue to engage with the world around you with a curious and critical mind. Because in a world that feels like it's constantly on edge, knowledge is power, understanding is key, and even in the face of uncertainty, there's always room for hope, for the possibility of a brighter future.
Don't underestimate the power of individual action either. Every choice we make, every conversation we have, every step we take can contribute to creating the world we want to see.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep exploring. It makes you think about the Bhopal disaster in India. The Economist had a piece on the 40th anniversary.
Oh, right.
It's a stark reminder of what can happen when industrial negligence takes place. The consequences can be devastating, and the impact, it can linger for generations.
It does. It casts a long shadow. For the survivors, they're still dealing with the health effects of that gas leak. And then there are the larger questions it raises about corporate accountability, environmental justice.
It's a sobering thought. Progress isn't always linear. We're striving for technological advancements, economic growth. But we can't afford to lose sight of the human cost. Safety, sustainability, the well-being of all people, those have to be priorities, not just profit.
Absolutely. And often those priorities are intertwined. Like take China's Green Great Wall Project, for example. The Economist covered that too.
Right.
This massive effort to combat desertification. It's had its challenges, but they've made impressive progress, increasing tree cover, protecting agricultural land.
It's a great example of how environmental initiatives can have social and economic benefits as well,
Yeah.
restoring that degraded land, improving the environment, creating jobs, boosting agricultural productivity. It improves the lives of the people who live there.
It shows that we can make a difference, even when facing these huge, seemingly insurmountable problems. Human ingenuity, determination, they can prevail. But it takes collective action, political will, a commitment to long-term thinking. It makes you wonder, though, with everything we've talked about today, what role can individuals play in all of this, in shaping a better future?
Yeah, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. Climate change, political instability, economic inequality. What can one person really do?
It's a question a lot of us ask ourselves, I think. But even small actions, they can make a difference. It starts with staying informed, engaging in those conversations that matter, making conscious choices in our daily lives.
So being mindful consumers, responsible citizens, active participants in our communities.
Exactly. Using our voices, our votes, even our wallets. Supporting businesses and initiatives that align with what we believe in. Educating ourselves and others about the challenges. Advocating for solutions. It's about understanding that we're all connected, that our actions, even the small ones, can contribute to a larger wave of change. As we wrap up this deep dive into The Economist, I'm struck by the sheer range of human experiences it captures. The tragedy of Bhopal, the triumph of Brazilian football, the quiet resilience of those Leningrad botanists, the ambition of those asteroid miners. It's an incredible tapestry, human endeavors, aspirations, and struggles all woven together.
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it? Even in a world that feels divided and chaotic, we're all connected by our shared humanity. Joy and sorrow, hope and despair, we all experience them. And we all have a stake in building a future that's more just, more compassionate, more sustainable. It's a great note to end on. To our listeners, if you've been inspired by what you've heard today, pick up a copy of The Economist. Dig into the stories that grab you. Keep engaging with the world with that curious and critical mind. Because in a world that feels like it's always on the brink of something, knowledge is power. Understanding is key. And even amid all the uncertainty, there's always room for hope, for the possibility of a brighter future.
And never underestimate the power you have to make a difference. Every choice, every conversation, every action can help shape the world you want to live in.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep exploring.